Hebrews chapter 6. We're going to talk about hope this morning. And I love the passage that Josh read, and that's the passage we are going to be focusing on this morning, is Hebrews 6, 13 through 20. And it's the idea that if you don't have hope, man, you are really in despair this morning. For those of us that have had a tough financial time over the past few years, man, it's tough to wake up every morning going, I don't even know if I have hope. I don't have hope that I'm going to get out of debt. I don't have hope that I'm going to ever get married. I don't have hope that I'm ever going to get rid of this cancer. I don't have hope that my kids and my relationship are ever going to get repaired. Man, when you wake up every morning and you don't feel like you have hope, man, that is the worst place to be. Because the thing is, you can get through anything if you feel like there's legitimate hope, right? If you feel like there's hope in something, even if the situation doesn't change, if you feel like there's hope for that thing to change in your life, you can get through anything. Because when you have hope, you realize there's an end goal. You realize, you know what? There's a possibility of this actually working out. But if you have no hope of it, then you start with despair. And there's nowhere for despair to go other than leading to depression and bitterness and anger, and you realize that your emotional state becomes very irritable. Because when there's no hope, man, there's nothing to do. You have no way of moving forward in your life if you feel like there's no hope. And we're going to talk about one of the most fantastic aspects of being human, that animals never have to wake up and have hope. Nothing in the animal kingdom wakes up and goes, I hope there's hope. My dog, when he gets up in the morning, man, he's just like, where's my bowl of dog food? His living is very simple. Where's my food? Where's my water? Where can I urinate? That's about the only three things that go through his mind. And sometimes the last one he chooses tends to be in my house, which is an appropriate choice for him, which he soon finds out about. Sometimes he makes a good choice, sometimes he makes a bad choice. But the thing is, for the animal kingdom, there's no experience of hope. Hope is unique to humanity. Hope is unique to me and you. And you want to know why that is? Because nothing else is created in the image of God like humans are. Nothing else is built in the image of our eternal Creator other than humans. We can have hope because our God knows the future. We can have hope because our God controls history. If you think history is just spinning out of control and you try to log on to Obamacare and it keeps on spitting you out or whatever, and you're like, this is the end of the world. Realize that God is in control. No matter what men and women do, God is in control. It might not go how you want, it might not go how I want, but God is always in control. And we're going to see that in Hebrews chapter 6 this morning, that no matter what happens in our life, we can have hope. We can have hope not because we're hoping the government bails us out. We can have hope not because we hope to get better this year. We can have hope not because our New Year's resolutions are going to be better this year than they were last year or for the last 20 years. We can have hope because our God controls history. We can have hope because our God, nothing slips out of his hand. Nothing slips out of his notice, including your life and my life. Let's look at an aspect of that this morning, Hebrews 6. We're going to start reading in verse 13. The writer of Hebrews in chapter 6 has just finished talking about don't fall away from God. Do not fall into apostasy. Apostasy means you regress. Apostasy means you detach. The writer of Hebrews here is just saying, hey, don't fall away from Jesus because he's all you got. You fall away from Christ, there is no salvation. If you detach, it's like jumping out of a plane going, oh, I think I'll be fine without a parachute. Things might be fine for a little while, but you're going to find out at the end things are not fine. What you should have done was stayed on the plane. Because when God is the pilot, you get to where you're supposed to go safely. When I got on the plane to fly to Seattle this last week, and I got on Alaska, and I sat down in my little cushy seat. I always say a prayer for the pilot, whom I've never met. They don't let me meet him. I walk on there. I don't even know who's on the other side of that door. Could be nobody. Could be a 6-year-old child going, what does this do? I have no idea who's on the other side of that door. But you know what? When that plane took off, I had total faith that that pilot was trained and he knew where he was going and he was going to get me there safely. And the beauty of knowing Jesus is that we know who's behind the door. God is not a mystery if you know Christ. But if you detach yourself, Paul is saying, you have no hope. There's no hope. You jump out of the plane without a parachute, you're going to find out there's no hope. And this is exactly what he's going to talk about, a person who had hope in God. He's going to show us a positive example of someone who had hope in God. In Hebrews 6:13. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself. I love that verse. You want to know why I love it? Because that is a declaration of the supremacy and the sovereignty of the Almighty God. If you can swear by yourself, that is studly. Because here's the thing. If we were to go into an agreement together, and we were going to go into business together, and your whole livelihood was staked on me, on me finishing our part of the agreement. Like you put your 401k, you put everything into this business startup that you and I were going to start, and everything revolved around me making sure I did my half or my part. You would make sure that we'd go to the lawyers and write down every single thing. Pastor Jim is going to do exactly what he said he was going to do, or he owes me $400,000 or whatever. You'd go through the whole thing. Because we know as humans, we're liars. We're manipulators. We're advantage taker-overs. That's not even a word. We do whatever it takes to protect self, right? So what we do is we say, I know you're telling me you're going to do it, but I don't believe you. So we're going to write it down on paper so that there's no miscommunication. So if we have to go to court, it's not me going, well, Johnny said he was going to do this. Pastor Jim said he was going to do this. And I'm going, I never said that. That was a figment of the coffee you drank that morning. And you know what he says right here? He says, because here's the thing. Over us, there's a court system. Over us, there's a police officer with a gun. He has more authority than we do. He's over us, right? We can always appeal to somebody higher in authority than if you and I have a disagreement, I can appeal to a higher authority. God says, there is no higher authority than me. I'm going to swear by myself that this is going to happen. If you can swear by yourself and have that be legitimate, you have the greatest power in the universe. Because there's no one higher than God. So he has to swear by himself that what I'm going to declare right now is going to come to pass. And not you, not anyone else is going to be able to change that. So there's no one higher for God to swear by. There's no higher authority than him, so he swears by himself. And he says, this is so sure it's going to happen that I'm going to swear by myself. I'm going to guarantee this is going to happen. Verse 14. Saying, so God is guaranteeing this by his own character. Surely I will bless you and multiply you. He's talking to Abraham. And thus Abraham, or Abram, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. Underline that. Underline that verse in your Bible. Highlight it, underline it. The reality is, hope does not need to exist if you can get it immediately. You don't have to hope for something you can go buy right now, right? Those of us that have everything we want, or people are like, he's so hard to buy for, because you always buy everything for yourself. If you want it right now, you go buy it. Or like you have to have the new purse or the new shoes or the new electronics or whatever for this year, and so you go buy it, and people are like, why did he go buy that? I was going to buy that for him for a present. If you have the ability to go get it right now, you don't have to hope for it, right? But hope only exists. Hope only exists where you can't go get it right away. When you have hope, it automatically means you have to wait. And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes, an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, and that's what we talked about. He made an oath by himself. So that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have a strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. Underline it. You can have hope in God because he does not lie. When God says he's going to do something, it's a guarantee. You are a liar. I am a liar. We are incapable of having pure integrity for our whole lives because we are sinful and we need grace and we need mercy. God does not need grace and mercy because he never lies. He never does anything wrong. He never does anything outside of his character. He always acts in perfect righteousness. He always acts in perfect love. Verse 19, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. Underline this. How can you have an anchor for your soul this morning? Many of you are drifting this morning. Many of you are so miserable living the lives that you're living because you're like, I'm so tired of stuff. It's like sitting at Thanksgiving dinner, you don't eat the whole day, and you pull up the chair to the table, and you see that big fat turkey that gave its life for you to eat. And you're like, this is going to be awesome. Grandma made her potatoes, and Jenny made her little cranberry sauce, and you're smelling, you're like going, praise God for smells. And you're just ready to eat. You can't wait. Your mouth is just like, oh, please, turkey. It's like when you gather around that table, man, you know that this is going to be amazing. And you can't wait to sit there and just gorge yourself on that food. I did. Man, I ate leftovers for 3 days. And it tasted better the day after. I mean, I was like praising God. But realize this. That some of us, when you're done eating, you go, I don't want to eat turkey ever again. You stuff so much turkey in your stomach, you're like, turkey makes me want to vomit. When, like, a half an hour ago, you're like, oh, please, turkey, come on, get on my plate. But then when you're stuffed with it, you're like, oh, dude, oh, man, I can't eat one more bite of this. I don't ever want to eat turkey the rest of my life. Many of us are so packed, and our lives are so miserable, and we go, you know what? The car didn't make me happy. The second wife didn't make me happy. The 14th dog didn't make me happy. The other child didn't make me happy. My new job didn't make me happy. Nothing makes me happy. I have everything a person in the world could ever wish or want for in a real sense, and I'm still miserable. When you reach that level of despair, you're like, drinking doesn't make me happy anymore. The heroin I'm doing, it doesn't make me happy anymore. It's actually destroying me from the inside out. The meth that I'm trying to hide from everybody that I just have to have and get high every day, I can feel it eroding me from the inside out. I'm totally miserable. I can't get back to that first high anymore. And the thing is that when you get to that level, you go, I am totally in despair. Because there's nothing in life that makes me happy. And when you reach that point, it's at that point that God puts his hand out and goes, now you need some real hope. Because now you've tried everything, and there's no hope in anything other than me. And God takes you by the hand and lifts you out of your despair when you put your hope in him. And that's exactly what he does for Abraham. Abraham is almost 100 years old, doesn't have a kid. And if you're 100 years old, you're not going to have a kid. At least not your own. And God says, watch what I'm going to do. And he gives him a child at 100 years old. Verse 19, we have this sure and steadfast anchor for the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. And so he's talking about there that Jesus is our hope. He's walked behind the curtain that we could not walk behind, which is the Holy of Holies. And Jesus has become our high priest forever. We can always have hope in him. Though we can't have hope on this world, of our wealth, of our pleasure, of the highs and lows of life, we can never find hope there ultimately. We can only find hope in our Jesus because of what he's done for us. Number one, hope requires a promise. Hope can only exist where a deficiency exists. So you can't have hope in something that you already have. Like right now, this is my Bible. This is the one I preached in for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't sit around I don't have hope that I'm going to have this Bible. Why? Because I've already got it, right? You don't have hope in things you already have. Hope can only exist where a deficiency exists. And this is where you and I find ourselves oftentimes, is there's a deficiency in our life. We feel the void, but yet we don't know how to fill it. So only in God can we have correct hope. And that's what we see with Abraham. He needed hope. He needed a promise from God. When God spoke to Abraham, he had been married for years with his wife, having no ability to produce an heir to his house and fortune. God then broke into history and made a promise that Abraham would have descendants that would be innumerable and would bless the whole earth. And we see that in Genesis 22. A promise is the foundation of hope, and the character of the promiser dictates how solid that foundation is. God was so sure of this promise coming true that he swore by himself that it would come to pass. Hope is unique to the human experience. Humans are built to hope. Abraham had so much faith in the promiser that he was willing to sacrifice his only son Isaac because he believed that God would raise him back from the dead. Believers can have hope because though they may have deficiencies, the loving character of God they trust in does not. Do you realize that God has no deficiencies? Do you realize that? God never is in a bad mood, unlike you and me. When you don't get the new iPhone or whatever and you're really angry this Christmas, you know what? All I asked for was one thing, one solitary thing, and nobody bought me the $600 phone. What's wrong with people? That day when you wake up and you're just so disappointed and you're like so angry in your heart, you're like, oh great, thanks for the 14th tie. I don't even wear ties, but I thank you for it. I'd rather have can I trade ties in for iPhones? That day, when you didn't get what you wanted and you're disappointed. Realize that now you have the joy of hoping for a phone. You get to spend another year in hope that there could be a phone in your future. Hope only exists where a deficiency exists. If you think that your life is already full and you have no room for God, then you have no need for hope. You don't hope in God. If everything's going well for you, it's why they said it's so hard for a rich man to be saved. Because when you can go buy everything you want at the drop of a hat, you're like, I don't even need God. Everything's going fine. I don't need God. I'm a millionaire. I could write a check for this house. You and I are built to hope. So what God does for even rich people is there's no way that you can fill the void that only God can fill, whether you're rich or poor. And so even in richness, there's misery. Because there's a deficiency built into humanity that you need to hope. You need to believe that God will come and save you. And that's what Abraham believed, that God was going to raise up a nation even though he was 100 years old, had no way to even procreate being that old. And God worked a miracle with him and his wife that she gave birth to Isaac. Imagine, ladies, you're like 90 years old giving birth to your first child. Wow. 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 My grandmother, 92 years old, just saw her in Seattle. She's getting remarried at 90 stinking 2. Wow. Time out, Grandma. It's time to just stay friends. True story. You know, I'm talking to her. I'm like, Grandma, hey, wow. Literally, she's a short little Norwegian woman. And so I'm looking down on the top of her head as I'm speaking to her. And I'm going, Grandma, her name's Thordis. I'm like, Grandma, you're 92. Call it a day. You know, I mean, why are you getting married again? What is up with that? And she's so in love again. She was married for over 60 years to my grandfather. And now he died 7-8 years ago. And so she's in love again. And there's a new hope, there's a new spark in her eye, being 92. Like that spark is like, that should be like disintegrated. It's like, That spark should have gone out forever ago. But no, you know what? There's a spark in her eye. Again, at 92, she's in love again. And here she's had the same name since she was like 22 years old. And she's going to change her name. Because now she's in love again. And there's new hope in her eyes. And there's a new world ahead of her. For how long, who knows? But there's a new world. And you know what I love about that is it doesn't matter how old you are. Man, if there's hope in your eyes, you can see it. When there's despair, you can see it. You can feel it. It's palpable. When you were around people that have hope, you're like, man, life is glorious. Number 2, hope requires patience. Number 1 was hope requires a promise. Number 2 is hope requires patience. Hope can only exist where inability exists. You can't have hope if you can go out and do it yourself. You don't need hope if you can go buy it right now. You don't need hope if you can go pull something off by yourself. Hope can only truly exist where your inability to pull it off exists. Abraham had no way of producing a child with his wife, but trusted in the promise of God. His inability allowed God's ability to be realized, but it was not realized immediately. From God's initial promise, Abraham waited patiently for 25 years, from 75 years old to 100 years old, for God to deliver Isaac to him. And we see that in Genesis 12 and Genesis 21. With the singular exception of Abraham following Sarai's advice and fathering a child with her servant, Abraham's patience was exemplary. Hope requires some distance between desire and delivery. Hope exists between the desire for it and the delivery of it. You can hope to get pregnant, but until you become pregnant, there's no ability to even realize that there's going to be a delivery of a son or a daughter sometime. Hope can only exist where the inability exists. And we see that with Abraham. Are you a giver-upper? Are you a giver-upper? The minute things don't go your way, I'm done. Whoa. I know you didn't get the parking spot, but there's plenty of others around. Oh, somebody pulled in there. I'm not going to shop right now. You could just go 5 spaces over and park. Oh, but I wanted that one. Spot 17. That was my special spot. My favorite number. Parking spot 17. Now somebody took it. I'm done. I don't know if I can go on. Life truly has come to an end. I need counseling. I mean, are you a giver-upper? Are you one of those people that just goes, oh, the baby's dirty. Oh, get out in the street. You throw the baby out, the bath water, the whole, you're tearing the whole room apart, throwing it out in the street. The baby's dirty. We can't go on. Abraham, at 75, maybe in the back of Abraham's mind, imagine being 75 years old, and God says, you're going to have a son. Abraham's like, hey. No pharmaceuticals have been created to help Abraham's procreative problems. Okay? We're talking almost 4,000 years ago. And God says, at 75, you're going to have a son. He's like, you're out of your mind. So then Abraham has hope. He's like, all right, 75, maybe I can still pull this off. And you know what God goes, 75? Nope. 80? Nope. 90? Nope. 98? Nope. I mean, after 25 years, you just go, I'm done. I'm not even going to try anymore. This is ridiculous to have hope in something that's not going to work. At 100 years old, at 99 years old, she gets pregnant with their son. Because it was in God's timing, not Abraham's. If things always have to be your way in your time, you're going to be disappointed in God a lot. Because God doesn't run off your time. God runs off his time. God doesn't morph himself to our timing. We morph ourselves to God's timing. We are molded by God. God is not molded by us. There's a reason you have a lot of anger with God, and the majority of it is because you may have not gotten what you wanted in the time you wanted it in. If you're a giver-upper, you're going to have to work really hard to have a relationship with God. Because here's the thing, when you give up all the time, God goes, oh, you still haven't learned your lesson. And so then you start back at square one. And then you start walking a little bit, and God, you're disappointed in something, and you give up. And God goes, oh, we still haven't learned. And you kind of go, why am I in this weird cycle with God where I never kind of grow? I'm always like being muted, like I never kind of grow in my relationship with God. Understand that God will never move you beyond the level of maturity that you've grown to. If you're staying as an infant Christian, it's because you haven't grown. It's because there's an aspect of your life that you've not letting go of. There's a disappointment with God that you've not said, God, you're God and I'm not God. I'll wait for you. I'll be patient. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep praying about this. I'm going to keep seeking you. I'm going to keep fellowshipping with others that have hope in you. A desire that can be immediately accomplished or realized does not need hope. For believers, God often uses increased waiting to test their faith in the one they claim to trust. Lastly, hope requires a payoff. I hope the Vikings win the Super Bowl this year. However, their record does not dictate that that will happen. And I'm talking about football for those of you that don't know anything about what I'm talking about, okay? So in the NFL, the National Football League, you have to have a certain record to be able to move into the playoffs. It does not look like the Lord is going to give that opportunity to my team this year. So, I can have hope that that will happen, but watch this. A hope that has no possibility of happening is no hope at all. Do you understand? It's wishful thinking. Hope is not wishful thinking. Ready? Reconnect me because we're almost done. Hope is not wishful thinking. Some of us go, oh, I wish for this or I hope for this or whatever. If your hope cannot be realized in the real world, your hope is not hope. It is wishful thinking that will never come true. However, when you hope in God, in the promises of God, God swears by himself that this thing will take place, that I will save your soul. When you die, you have need no fear of hell or judgment or anything in this life or in the next life because I have saved you and I promise to save you and I never fail. I promise to take care of you in this life. You might not get everything that you want, but I will give you everything you need if you will walk with me. God will never fail you. You can trust in that. You can put hope in him because God will not fail you. You can put your hope in a lot of things that will never come true in this world. And all it is wishful thinking. It's not true biblical hope. Because hope always has the ability to come true. And with God, if you trust in him and his promises, it will come true. It's well-founded. You can stake your life on God's promises. A portion of Abraham's hope was realized in his lifetime, that Isaac was born to him. The rest of God's promise, which was, I'm going to make a great nation out of you, which he only had one son. I mean, what if Isaac would have died in childbirth? What if Isaac would have died when he was 12, throwing rocks with other kids? And somebody would have smacked Isaac in the head and he would have died. Abraham would have gone, wow, God, your promise didn't come true. You said you were going to make me a great and mighty nation. And yet 4,000 years later, Israel's still here. The Jews are still here. And we, by Jesus, have been made into billions that follow the true God. Jesus of the lineage of Abraham. We are a spiritual nation. We are a spiritual family that God has made innumerable throughout the centuries. God has kept his promise to Abraham. The rest of God's promise was realized throughout the thousands of years down to our day, where Abraham's descendants are innumerable. The payoff for a believer's hope might not even happen in their lifetime. Additionally, God's ultimate payoff and his promise to bless all the people of the world through Abraham was salvation through the arrival of Jesus. Hope in chance, like when you throw dice or if you go to Vegas and you're like, oh, please, please give me red. Please, red, red. And you lost your savings. Thanks for coming by. Paying the light bill here at the the Wynn or whatever. And you're like, I just left $12,000 on the table to the casino to pay the pit boss. And now I have to sell my car and drive a Yugo or a Chevette. You realize that you can have hope, but if you have hope in foolishness, it's ill-placed hope. Whereas when we trust in God and have hope in God, it's guaranteed to come through, and God will always bless us, never rip us off. Unlike Vegas. Hope and chance is no hope at all, but only wishful thinking. Biblical hope does not just have the possibility of coming true, but the certainty of coming true. The coming of Jesus into the world is the ultimate example of a hope promised, a hope waited for, and a hope realized. And we see that in Luke 2, where the angel announces Christ's birth. And we'll be seeing that as we get closer to Christmas Eve. And we're going to walk for the next 5 weeks, for the next 4 weeks, through the Advent, through the coming of Jesus, different aspects. And ultimately on Christmas Eve, we're going to light this candle, the last candle, which is the candle of Jesus, finally coming into the world. Now, believers have an anchor of hope that his promise they patiently wait for will have an eternal payoff someday. Isn't it awesome when something you hope for actually can come true? Isn't it awesome when something you hope for actually does come true? When your marriage gets saved? When like 2 or 3 months ago, you were like, this is going to be our last Christmas together. Why? Because I hate you. Remember those conversations from a few months ago or last summer? Remember those? When you're like, this is going to be the last Thanksgiving because I hate you. We'll split up whatever we have. The kids can stay with you one weekend. We'll stay with me one weekend. I can't stand you any longer in my life. And then we see some amazing work of God. That God does some weird thing in both of your hearts, and all of a sudden you have some kind of functional dialogue that's not yelling and screaming and plates flying across the room. And all of a sudden God does this weird thing where your heart is like stone, and all of a sudden it becomes soft. And you're like, I never thought I would care about you one moment in my whole life. And then God does this miraculous work where all of a sudden husband and wife who were one, now we're separated in heart, but now God brings them back together. It's the miraculous hope that only God can give. You got a kid that's apart from your family, and all of a sudden you open dialogue again with them, and you're like, I haven't seen Johnny at one of our family gatherings in 20 years. All of a sudden he shows up and he goes, you know what? God's been doing some great things in my life. I just want to say, I want to apologize to you, Dad, for what a jerk I've been for the last 20 years of my adult life. Mom, I'm sorry all the heartache it caused you. And all of a sudden you go, God is real. These things don't come out of nowhere. I can have hope because God is working in my family's life. God is working in my own life. It might not be on my timing, but God is doing amazing things if I'm willing to be patient. And that's my hope and prayer for you today, is that we can have hope not because we're great. We can have hope because Jesus is great. And Jesus never fails. Jesus never fails.